It's late September 1850 and London has no idea it's living through the deadliest summer in human memory. Within 3 weeks, cholera will claim another 4,000 souls. Within a year, the city will bury 14,000 of its people. But right now, on this gray Thursday morning, the Thames still flows, the market's still open, and a million people still believe tomorrow will come. You're standing at London Bridge as dawn breaks over the world's largest city. The air tastes like coal smoke and river water. You can hear the bells of St. Magnus the Martyr striking six, the cry of gulls, the grinding of cartwheels on cobblestone. Behind you, the medieval city rises in a tangle of spires and chimney stacks. Before you, the river churns brown and thick, carrying everything the city discards back toward the sea. This is the capital of the British Empire at its zenith. 1 in 5 people on Earth answers to Queen Victoria. The Great Exhibition will open in Hyde Park in 8 months, showcasing the technological marvels of the age. Steam engines, telegraphs, mass production. But you wouldn't survive the day, neither would most modern people dropped into this moment. The water will kill you, the air will sicken you, the disease pooling in the alleys will find you, and none of these 2 million people pressing around you know they're drinking death from every well. Let's walk. You're standing at Billingsgate Market, 300 yards east of the bridge. The stench hits you first, not just fish but the Thames itself, a smell so thick it becomes texture in your throat. Hundreds of women in stained aprons stand knee-deep in ice and scales, gutting mackerel with knives that flash in the gaslight. The shouting never stops. Auctioneers bark prices. Merchants curse in Cockney dialect so thick you struggle to understand it. Barrels slam. Boots splash through puddles that aren't entirely water. A porter hauls a basket of herring on his head, earning perhaps 12 shillings for a week's labor. That's barely enough for bread and a corner to sleep in. His children won't attend school, there's no law requiring it yet. They're likely working too, sorting fish guts for pennies or worse, climbing inside chimneys in Mayfair townhouses, their lungs already blackening with soot at age 7. The fish came upriver during the night, caught off the Essex coast. Fresh by 1850 standards, which means gutted and packed in melting ice for 16 hours. You watch a street seller slice a kipper open and eat it raw, grinning through broken teeth. Your stomach lurches. His probably doesn't, he's built immunity or he'd be dead already. The woman beside him is coughing, wetly, constantly, tuberculosis probably, she'll be working until she collapses. Behind you, Thames Street runs dark beneath overhanging buildings that block the morning sun. Somewhere across the river in Southwark, the first cholera cases of the day are already convulsing in their beds. The parish registers will record them simply as flux. Nobody yet understands that Dr. John Snow's theory that cholera spreads through contaminated water is correct. They still believe in miasma, the poisonous air theory. They're pumping sewage directly into the river you can see from here, then drawing drinking water from the same current. You need to keep moving, the crowd presses close, too close. In 1850, London has no concept of personal space as you understand it. Time to move west? You walk through streets that narrow with every turn, past the Royal Exchange where merchants trade cotton futures, through Cheapside where shop windows display silk imported from India at prices a laborer couldn't earn in 3 years. The city changes. The buildings lean inward. The sunlight disappears. You're now entering St. Giles, the most notorious slum in London. Charles Dickens walked these streets researching Oliver Twist. He called them wretched. That's charitable. You're standing in a courtyard barely 15 feet wide, surrounded by 5-story tenements that look moments from collapse. Laundry hangs between windows like moldy flags. The ground beneath your boots is slick with something you don't want to identify: human waste, animal refuse, rotting food, all mixing into a black sludge that never fully dries. 40 people might live in the building behind you. 1 room per family. 1 privy for all of them, emptying into a cesspit in the basement that overflows when it rains. Which it did 2 days ago. You can smell it. Everyone can smell it. But rent here is cheap, 3 shillings a week for a room, and for families earning 6 shillings weekly, that's the difference between a roof and sleeping rough under the Adelphi arches. A child runs past, barefoot in October, chasing a rat with a stick, entertainment and pest control in one. An old woman sits in a doorway selling watercress, wilted and brown, pulled from the Serpentine in Hyde Park this morning. She's charging a penny per bunch. You notice her hands trembling. Gin most likely. The spirit shops here sell it for 3 pence a quart, oblivion cheaper than food. Drunk for a penny, dead drunk for 2 pence, the signs advertise. They're not joking. Above you, windows open. Chamber pots empty into the street. Someone shouts a warning, but not soon enough. This happens dozens of times daily. The sludge in the gutters flows downhill, eventually reaching drains that empty into the Fleet River, which empties into the Thames, which supplies the water pumps, which fill the cups of everyone in London who can't afford to drink beer instead. The air feels different now, heavier. You're breathing disease with every inhale: tuberculosis, typhoid, smallpox, scarlet fever, cholera. They live in these courts like permanent residents. 10% of children born in St. Giles die before their first birthday. 20% don't reach age 5, but ask anyone here if they'd leave and they'd stare at you blankly. Leave for where? This is London. This is the world. You walk north, emerging from the rookery like surfacing from underwater. The Strand stretches before you, wide and almost elegant, lined with shops selling books, umbrellas, ivory combs, luxuries that exist in a different economic universe than the one you just left. Carriages roll past, wheels clattering on stone. A gentleman in a top hat and frock coat steps around you without making eye contact. His collar is starched white, his boots shine. He's probably breathing through a handkerchief soaked in lavender oil, believing it protects him from the miasma. You're now at Covent Garden Market. Controlled chaos. Flower girls arrange roses and lilies on barrows, shouting prices to anyone who passes. Vegetable sellers stack turnips and cabbages in pyramids. A costermongering man pushes a barrow of apples past you, calling out, "Fine pippins, a penny each." His voice is hoarse from hours of shouting. This is his office, his inventory, his entire business. Wheeled through the streets. The market buzzes with transaction. A kitchen maid from a Belgrave Square townhouse haggles over potatoes, counting pennies from a leather purse her employer gave her. She'll walk 3 miles home carrying 30 pounds of provisions on her back. A street performer plays violin badly. A pickpocket works the crowd. You watch him lift a silk handkerchief from a distracted clerk's pocket with fingers so quick you nearly miss it. Nobody else notices, or they do and say nothing. This is London. Survival requires selective blindness. Beneath the commerce, though, something darker threads through the crowd. You notice people clutching their stomachs. A woman sits against a wall, pale as paper, breathing shallowly. Cholera doesn't announce itself with warning, it strikes within hours. Victims purge fluids until their blood thickens, their eyes sink, their skin turns blue. They call it the Blue Death. Without intravenous hydration, which won't be invented for another 30 years, death arrives in 12 hours, maybe less. The water pump stands at the corner of the market, painted green, visited by dozens of people every hour. They fill cups, fill jugs, drink directly from the spout. Children splash water on their faces. A dog laps from the runoff puddle. 20 feet below this pump, a cesspit leaks into the groundwater. Microscopic bacteria, invisible to everyone here because the germ theory of disease won't gain acceptance for another decade, swirl in every drop. You want to scream at them to stop, but what would you say? Tiny organisms you can't see are killing you. They call you mad, lock you in bedlam, and they'd keep drinking. Time moves. You walk south again, down toward the river, following the crowds to Hungerford Stairs, where the Thames laps against stone steps slick with algae. This is where the working poor cross to Southwark via the suspension bridge, paying a halfpenny toll that many consider extortion. Charles Dickens worked in a blacking factory here as a child, pasting labels on bottles of shoe polish. His father imprisoned for debt in Marshalsea prison across the river. He never forgot the shame. Neither did London. You're standing at the waterline. The Thames moves slowly here, almost jellied, choked with sewage, dead animals, industrial runoff, coal tar, chemical dyes from the factories upriver. The color defies description, brown-green-gray, occasionally breaking into iridescent oil slicks that shimmer in the weak sunlight. The smell makes Billingsgate seem pleasant in retrospect. This is the river that supplies drinking water to half the city. This exact water, barely strained through sand filters at the pumping stations, flows from kitchen taps in Bloomsbury and Holborn. Mudlarks work the exposed banks at low tide, children mostly, scavenging for coal fragments, rope scraps, metal pieces, anything sellable. They're waist-deep in toxic sludge, barefoot, competing with rats the size of cats. A girl no older than 9 pulls a copper nail from the mud and pockets it with satisfaction. That's a farthing at the scrap dealer. Maybe 2 if she's lucky. She'll do this for 8 hours, earning perhaps 3 pence, which her family needs for rent, for bread, for survival. A pleasure boat passes, headed downriver toward Greenwich. Ladies with parasols sit on the upper deck. Gentlemen smoke cigars. They don't look at the mudlarks. They've trained themselves not to see poverty. It's a skill the wealthy cultivate. Look away, look through, look past. Acknowledge nothing you can't change, and you can't change this, so why look? The air feels different now. Not just the smell, though that's overwhelming, but the atmosphere itself. Thick, humid, heavy with particles you don't want to name. Every breath coats your lungs with the microscopic detritus of 2 million people living without modern sanitation, without germ theory, without the faintest understanding that their civilizational waste is literally poisoning them. If you're finding yourself pulled into this world, consider subscribing. There are many more days like this one waiting. A barge hauling night soil, human waste from cesspits, moves upstream, heading to the market gardens in Chelsea, where the contents will be spread as fertilizer on the vegetables sold tomorrow at Covent Garden. The circle completes. Consumption and excretion, food and waste, life and death, all mixing in the Thames and redistributing through the city in an endless toxic cycle. You notice your throat hurts. You've been here 5 hours. You're now at Whitechapel, east of the Tower, where London frays into industry and immigration. The street roars with traffic, wagons hauling goods to and from the docks, omnibuses packed with passengers clinging to the roofs, street vendors shouting in accents from Ireland, Poland, Russia, India. The British Empire funnels its people here to the capital, where opportunity promises everything and delivers mostly suffering. The buildings press close, dark brick, soot-stained, windows so grimy they're nearly opaque. A slaughterhouse operates openly on the corner. You can see carcasses hanging in the doorway, blood pooling in the street gutter. Nobody objects. This is commerce. A tannery next door adds its chemicals to the general miasma. Your eyes water, your lungs burn, but look at the people around you. They're shopping, working, living. This is normal. This is breathable. A Jewish peddler sells second-hand clothes from a barrow, each item carrying the sweat and stories and possibly diseases of its previous owner. A woman haggles over a stained dress. She'll wear it tomorrow. No disinfection, no laundering, just transaction and immediate need. In the doorway behind them, a man lies unconscious. Drunk or dead, you can't tell, neither can anyone else. Nobody checks. You walk past the Whitechapel workhouse, where the destitute perform labor in exchange for food and shelter. Breaking rocks, picking oakum, sleeping in sex-segregated dormitories that separate husbands from wives, mothers from children, because the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834 declared that poverty must be made as unpleasant as possible to discourage dependency. They're succeeding. The building looks like a prison. It functions like one. But the alternative, sleeping rough, starving slowly, is worse. The afternoon light slants through the coal smoke, turning the air golden gray. Beautiful almost. You're standing at the corner of Whitechapel and Commercial Street, watching London flow past in all its grimy, gorgeous, deadly vitality. A city of 2 million people generating more wealth than any place in human history, built on the backs of children eating kipper guts and women selling watercress and men hauling cargo for 12 shillings a week. Your throat definitely hurts now, your head aches, you've been breathing poison for 8 hours. And it's only afternoon, the day isn't over, the work continues, the city grinds forward. Neither is the dying. How do we know this? Parish burial records primarily. The bills of mortality published weekly listing causes of death with brutal honesty. Cholera, consumption, flux, want meaning starvation. Charles Booth's poverty maps created 40 years later documenting which streets housed which classes. Henry Mayhew's interviews with London's working poor published in the Morning Chronicle, giving voice to costermongers and mudlarks and crossing sweepers. Medical reports from physicians like John Snow, who mapped cholera deaths around the Broad Street pump in Soho and proved contaminated water was the vector. The gaps are real. We can't know exactly how everything smelled, though descriptions from writers like Dickens and Engels give us approximations. We can't know individual thoughts, though diaries from the period reveal patterns of resignation, faith, occasional hope. We can't know precisely how many died from specific causes. Record-keeping was inconsistent, diagnosis often wrong. But the overall mortality statistics tell an undeniable story. London in 1850 was slowly killing its people. Within 3 weeks of this September day, cholera claimed another 4,000 lives. Within a year, 14,000 were dead. The epidemic finally ended not through medical intervention. Snow's theories were still rejected by most of the establishment, but through the arrival of winter, which slowed bacterial transmission. The following summer it returned, and the summer after that. London didn't begin building a comprehensive sewer system until 1858, after the Great Stink made the Thames so noxious that Parliament couldn't meet. Joseph Bazalgette's sewers, still functioning today, redirected waste downstream away from water intake points. Cholera cases plummeted, not because miasma theory was correct, but because separating sewage from drinking water accidentally implemented Snow's recommendations. The people you passed wouldn't have thought of themselves as victims. They were Londoners, resilient, adaptable, proud of their city's power and reach. They believed in progress and empire, in the possibility that their children might climb one rung higher on the social ladder. Some did, most didn't. The structural barriers were too immense: no universal education, no labor protections, no safety net beyond the punitive workhouse. You wouldn't have survived this day. Not because you're weak, but because your immune system has never encountered these particular strains of Victorian disease. Because your lungs aren't adapted to breathing coal smoke. Because your gut flora can't process contaminated water. Because you drink from a pump, eat street food, breathe deeply in a crowd, touch surfaces, wipe your eyes, all the casual gestures of daily life that in 1850 London meant constant exposure to pathogens. The city couldn't have known it was poisoning itself. They looked at the Thames and saw commerce, transportation, power. They looked at the coal smoke and saw industry, progress, modernity. They looked at their own feces in the streets and saw an inconvenience, not a death sentence. The paradigm shift required to understand germ theory, to accept that invisible organisms cause disease, to imagine infrastructure changes on the scale of Bazalgette's sewers, all of that was still years away. They were living in the gap between problem and solution, dying while the evidence accumulated. The children playing in Whitechapel that afternoon, the woman selling watercress in St. Giles, the mudlarks on the Thames, the fish porters at Billingsgate, they were all breathing borrowed time in a city that didn't yet understand what time cost. Neither did they. Neither do we.